Christina partners with customers to electrify their fleet or workplace by providing custom charging equipment solutions as part of FPL Evolution, a growing electric vehicle network, including public charging, residential charging, and commercial electrification. Recently, Christina partnered with 5 school districts to design, build, and maintain fast charging infrastructure that will power each of the district's electric school bus fleets. The first 142 ports are operational at 13 locations. Construction of additional 40 ports at 4 more bus terminals is expected to be completed in the 2024-2025 school year. Welcome, Christina.
Thank you, Tyra. And thank you everyone for having me here. You could go to the next slide. You can do the next one too. Thanks. Okay. So before I go into the utility side, just kind of sharing a few of the lessons learned that I've learned on the charging infrastructure side, partnering with those 5 school districts. So kind of going along with what Ron and Paul were sharing. So for charging infrastructure is very different than what the drivers and the transportation team are used to at each of these districts. And so learning how to use the chargers, understanding the length of the cable that the charger has on it to make sure as you're ordering your buses and knowing where your ports are and whether or not the placement of your charger will reach the ports. So as you continue to expand, kind of knowing, are you putting them on the front and the back? Are you pulling in? Are you doing a pull-through charger? All of those are really important. When we started our partnership with the 5 school districts, it was part of a pilot program approved by the Florida Public Service Commission, where the districts had each applied for grant funding through the VW settlement funds. So not the federal ones, but previous to that, there was, the states that got the VW settlement funds. They were able to secure funding for their buses, and we were able to provide charging infrastructure to learn with them what was involved from the installation from the utility side, from the installation of the customer side, typically chargers, and then also from a rate standpoint. The biggest thing we're learning now that many of these are operational is some similar to what you hear in the tech industry with laptops is, have you reset your breaker? So I don't know, Ron and Paul, if you've had that experience, but when a charger goes out, typically resetting the breaker is the quickest fix to get something back online. The second seems to be the communication with the cell towers. And so what we've done with our chargers is put in cellular cards that are multi-carrier so that they can quickly find another carrier to do those communications with so that you can see what's happening. As you all know, Florida Power and Light Service Territory was very largely impacted by Hurricane Milton, and as we learn with your planning for infrastructure that are also in areas that could be impacted by storms, certain things that you may want to consider is whether the transformer that as you're designing this, does the transformer have a switch for you to bring in your portable generator? With these districts that are out right now, they're not operational, but they are experiencing outages like they would anything where maybe a transformer needs to go out. There might be issues with feeder lines, and the bus depots are not connected. A lot of the critical infrastructure for schools schools are considered critical infrastructure. So schools might be up and running first because they're shelters, but your bus depots might be later in the restoration time period. And so you're going to want to consider, how you're using those buses if you're eventually going to do vehicle to grid to support things, but kind of planning on if you have a portable generator to be able to pull in to your transformer and provide that as restoration is continuing if there's a need to do that. So we did do that with one of our districts that we're partnering with. And learning, so very early in the process of learning, but there's a lot of great things that we're learning. Another thing that we learned from these pilots, or when we started, The original intent was that they would have high-powered level 2 chargers, and that is kind of the AC power that they're 19 kilowatts, not a lot of infrastructure upgrades required for that. But as we went through this journey with them, they found that their routes, because they needed midday charging or they had longer rural routes, that they needed to shift to more of a low-powered fast charger, which requires more infrastructure. So they went with 30 kW fast chargers and 60 kW fast chargers. Obviously those costs for the charger side, the cost for the transformers, and the cost of your electric bill goes up because these are demand charges. These customers, these types of infrastructure, or a commercial customer typically have just demand charges, and so that can impact things. So as we go through this, I know we're over time, so I'll try to speak quickly. You can always ask questions or reach out to me. But the big things that I want to talk through are connecting with your customer advisor, the new service upgrades, and then learning about what your utility has as far as EV programs and electric rates. Please go to the next slide. Okay, so communicating with your electric utility. You're hearing this a lot, but communicate often with them and early in the process. I know within Florida Power and Light, there's an assigned customer advisor for all school districts. This is most likely the case for other utilities as well. Those customer advisors typically work with your energy managers, but they are the one-stop shop for questions on who do you call. So that's typically the first question that comes up is who do I work with at the utility? And so finding out who that customer advisor will get you in contact with the service planner, or if there's a major construction contact within power delivery that handles that, or like someone like myself who does electrification consulting either through our own programs or programs and how to get you started for your district. So reaching out to them early in the process. You may have multiple depots and you're trying to figure out what is the right depot to start with or whether the impacts are. And so starting off early is great. And then also sharing what your long-term plans are, even if it's, I'm not really sure. But, you know, one of the lessons we learned, right, was we designed as far as our pilot programs for transformer sizing for the infrastructure that we were installing. But as you start to do more, it really is important to know, do I need to upgrade that transformer? How is that going to work? And understanding kind of those costs. So brainstorming and working with your utility is really important. If you're applying for a grant, we get a lot of districts that are applying for grants. Reach out and obtain a letter of recommendation or a letter of intent. I work a lot with districts on the letters of recommendations, and then our power delivery major accounts manager will help with the letter of intent. And they can even, depending on how much you know when you're applying for the grant, can provide some kind of a ballpark estimate or details to support you on what you're doing there for your grant application. The electric rates. So the school districts really, if you have chargers that can have software in them to manage your usage, then time of use rates, even if they're the standard time of use rates, can really help with your electric bills. Again, they're demand customers for the electric buses, and that might be kind of different than what you're used to from you know your costs of your diesel or gas buses. And so understanding how your electric rates work and how your buses, the timing of when your buses will charge and what those charge rates look like will help you with your planning. And then understanding your EV charging offerings. At FP&L, that program that I had managed previously has sunset, and we've moved to an on-bill solution, and that's kind of like a financing over time. But there are various programs that exist through different utilities. So reaching out and just understanding what they are can be helpful as you're planning. You can go to the next slide. Okay, determining charging and power requirements. So the most common things I've seen for school bus depots is a transformer. So I'm going to stand up. The light automatically turned off. I'm not moving around. So there we go. So it's the installation of a transformer. There might be a requirement for a new pole or a feeder line or a lateral, or the things that I have seen that customers didn't realize is that for some of this infrastructure, especially if you're going with a DC fast charger, is that it requires 3-phase power. But the bus depots didn't have 3-phase power and they had single phase, so that requires longer lead times. It's more costly to you, and so that could help you with your planning on if you again have multiple facilities, knowing which ones have single phase versus 3-phase and helping you plan accordingly for that. When you're working with your service planner, it's good for them to understand the number of chargers, the type of charger, that power output, to evaluate your capacity. Further, any documents that you have from your panel or one-line diagram, to get to them in advance. And then if you have other bus depots that you have installed things out, giving them that information so that they can look at that and compare to that as well. The service planner is going to assess the capacity and work with you with preliminary design drawings, and then let you know what's needed to move on in the process as far as easements and permits and anything else. The next slide. All right, and then the last one is really just understanding the construction and installation requirements. And I know a couple of the other panelists have mentioned this is a long lead time. And so what we've experienced within Florida Power and Light, right, is that the typical jobs that we've installed for school bus electrification have required transformers that may require an 8 to 12 month lead time. And that lead time starts from the time you've gotten your final designs. So as you're working through that, know that could impact your timeline. So your construction can start, there could be things happening, but you may end up waiting on a transformer. And so getting them early in the process and kind of mapping that out. Again, we've had some projects that the transformers have come in 4 to 6 months. Others have come on that higher end. So that's just kind of the average, and really understanding, the size of the upgrades that you're doing. Understanding submission of your necessary forms. The easements and permits are typically required for this type of work from the transformer side, and obtaining that information can impact your timelines. Permits might need, we had one location where a permit was required from 2 different locations, or 2 different, areas of approval. And so that, coordination with those groups was interesting and impacted timelines. Understanding your contribution in aid of construction. I won't go into what that means now, but if you have questions on what that means, I can certainly do that. But that's your portion of the utility upgrade. If there is something related to that upgrade that you would have to contribute to. And then once you're ready for that, they're ready to get started, then the service planner will come out and do a pre-construction meeting to talk through how your site will be impacted as they work through those connections. And then lastly, it would be the service connection. So once you're powered up and you've gotten approved for the inspections, they'll coordinate the time for you to get your new meter, if it is going on a new meter in service, to energize. And that's the high points of the construction side from the utility. But again, if you have any questions, you can certainly reach out to me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christina.